Alright, so welcome back to another episode of Twak Analyzing the Witness. First things first, I knew I had forgotten something here. There is an audio log, just kind of hidden down there. Though, I do just want to note that it's kind of funny how if you stand directly opposite the solution, it kind of looks like a straight line just going up to the mountain, thanks to perspective. Alright, let's just get right into the audio log.
The concept of a clock enfolds all succession in time. In the concept, the 6th hour is not earlier than the 7th or 8th, although the clock never strikes the hour, save when the concept biddeth. Nicholas of Cusa, 1450.
Okay, so that is another fun quote from Cusa. So, from what I understand, Cusa is relating this to like the perception of time from an omniscient, omnipotent being, because that's sort of what a lot of Nicholas of Cusa's work relates to. And in this case, he is saying how when we look at a clock, the physical clock itself, the numbers aren't in like a line; they're in a loop. And theoretically, from that loop, we could start at any point, and that would be the start point. And because of that, they're all kind of at the same distance from the start. So like, even though you could say like, oh, 6 is less than 7, or like 6 o'clock is before 7 o'clock, on the clock, if you had started at 7, then 6 would be after the 7. Likewise, 6 o'clock in one day is after 7 o'clock in the previous day, and so forth. It's kind of esoteric, but it's importantly noted. It's placed next to the reflector panel, which, it's sort of a clock. It has 12 distinct locations. 1, 2, 3. Oh wait, no, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, wait, yeah, it has 12 placements. Which is, like a clock. It's drawing a comparison between the clock and the sun, which is pretty important. And then also it's saying, like, when we chose which direction the reflector panel would go, we didn't choose so based on, like, any sort of time. We kind of just chose where it goes. If this were a clock, it doesn't have any numbers, so this could be the 6th or 7th or 12th or 1st hour. We simply chose to, strike that number, that position. And so, in a way, we did exactly as Cusa said, where we struck when the concept biddeth. Again, it's a little esoteric, but it is also relevant to the desert, since the sun has, literally since the dawn of humans, kind of been the symbol of time. People use it to keep track of time. Our sense of time is kind of based around it, with like days and nights being, inherently based around the position of the sun, or at least our position related to it. And as far as like the shadows go, that's also kind of like, sundials were an early technology to keep track of time, and it utilized the sun, much like, the desert has other early technology that uses the sun, like that lighthouse. I'll go ahead and do this, by the way. Oh, wait. There we go. There's a few of those environmental puzzles that connect to this hole right here, and this is getting to one of the big parts of the game, one of the big key moments in the game's themes. You can see down there through this hole, and there's also another place we've been underground, which is in the desert. And you remember those skylights? Well, those skylights kind of went right through this way, where the windmill is. The beam is crossing in front of that, the laser there. And we were kind of shown that the windmill exists from the orchard, and there were those X's and flowers. Also, I just want to note here is literally a map of the human body's nervous system made out of roots. If the comparison between tree roots and the body wasn't clear enough. All right, but so for one thing, this cover on the door, you make a cross shape. That next to the orchard, make of that what you will. It's probably nothing major. It's more so just like, it's interesting that the windmill is in the shape of an X when it pauses, but the doorway is this plus shape. Okay, so yeah, pretty much it's all drawing you towards the windmill, the laser beam and how it goes to the town, the skylights, the orchard, and it has a really easy way to open it. And then you go underneath it. There's this nice underground area. You venture ever forward till we get to here, which looks kind of like what was behind the desert temple, right? But we can't go there. There's something else between the desert temple and the windmill. So instead, we can go towards the hole in the ground we saw. And here it is, the theater. This puzzle has significance that I'll explain much later. For now, it's the theater. So, it's got curtains, it's got wood paneling like a little stage. It's a pretty nice place. You can see that hole in the sky there. But then we have this hexagon panel, and we already know one hexagon solution to this from the bunker door we opened. If you've played the game, you know that this is where you enter those to get videos. And so we know one video. Let's go ahead and input it.
Well, that's no better a solution than any of the others, is it? So, in the end, have we learned anything from this look at why the world turned out the way it did that's of any use to us in our future? Something, I think. That the key to why things change is the key to everything. How easy is it for knowledge to spread? And that in the past, the people who made change happen were the people who had that knowledge, whether they were craftsmen or kings. Today, the people who make things change, the people who have that knowledge, are the scientists and the technologists who are the true driving force of humanity. And before you say, what about the Beethovens and the Michelangelos? Let me suggest something with which you may disagree violently. That at best, the products of human emotion, art, philosophy, politics, music, literature, are interpretations of the world that tell you more about the guy who's talking than about the world he's talking about. Second-hand views of the world, made third-hand by your interpretation of them. Things like that, as opposed to this. Know what it is? It's a bunch of amino acids, the stuff that goes to build up a worm, or a geranium, or you. This stuff's easier to take, isn't it? Understandable. Got people in it. This scientific knowledge is hard to take because it removes the reassuring crutches of opinion, ideology, and leaves only what is demonstrably true about the world. And the reason why so many people may be thinking about throwing away those crutches is because, thanks to science and technology, they have begun to know that they don't know so much, and that if they are to have more say in what happens to their lives, more freedom to develop their abilities to the full, they have to be helped towards that knowledge that they know exists and that they don't possess. And by help towards that knowledge, I don't mean give everybody a computer and say help yourself. Where would you even start? No, I mean, trying to find ways to translate the knowledge, to teach us to ask the right questions. See, we're on the edge of a revolution in communications technology that is going to make that more possible than ever before. Or, if that's not done, to cause an explosion of knowledge that will leave those of us who don't have access to it as powerless as if we were deaf, dumb, and blind. And I don't think most people want that. So what do we do? I don't know. But maybe a good start would be to recognize within yourself the ability to understand anything, because that ability's there, as long as it's explained clearly enough. And then go and ask for explanations. And if you're thinking right now, what do I ask for? Ask yourself if there's anything in your life that you want changed. That's where it starts.
All right. So that was the James Burke video. It is the first video you'll usually find if you just sort of play the game in the normal route. It's behind that first bunker. There's sort of 4 distinct bullet points I want to talk about here. The first of which is that the start of the video here. Actually, first, let me just say, if you just back up, you'll notice that the panel here has the solution again. And when you zoom in to solve it, you actually see the video rewinding. This way it directly tells you that, like, yes, there is a way to rewatch the video, and you can choose specific moments.
Well, that's no better a solution than any of the others, is it?
Okay, so that line, that's no better a solution than any of the others, it's sort of a joke at the player, like oh, you solved this bunker door, and then you got this mysterious code, and when you input it, that's the first thing you notice, is that, like, oh, that wasn't that interesting of a solution. It just led to more questions, like, why is this video here? What does it mean? It doesn't really answer much, so much as it is just another in a chain of actions. But then he goes on to a few other points. The first is that he sort of says that like art is comfortable, and it's interesting to us because of that it's connected to, like, sort of our own subjective interpretations of the world. But because it's subjective, it's not sort of exactly true, and not like as valid as truth. It's not the truth, I guess I should say. He compares, like, that rug, which is like an interpretation of the world that's then passed on to you, and then you interpret it for yourself, to a tray of amino acids, saying that, like, these are more like, I don't want to say interesting, but they're more worth exploring because they offer the sort of truth about the world. However, there is sort of a contradiction in that so while we know what amino acids are, those don't exactly guide our day-to-day, like, decision making. They're not as close to our own life, which is sort of what the Eddington doorway audio log was saying. This sort of disagrees with that. And additionally, the image of a petri dish is itself a third-hand representation of something, as we're not looking at the actual amino acids. We're looking at, like, a microscope's perception of it that is then put onto paper. So we can't accurately view like the amino acids in the same way we can a rock, which there's a whole other bunch of questions there, but so it's not quite as solid of an assertion there. However, even then, Burke is sort of talking more about what brings better decision making. This comes into the next point of his sort of talk here, where simply having access to knowledge isn't knowledge itself. That for people to actually learn, they have to be taught how to learn. They can't just be given facts and say, have fun. He especially gives a pretty prescient, a pretty forward-thinking prediction that, like, you know, with the explosion of computers, people will have access to all the knowledge in the world, but it's useless if they don't know how to accurately look things up and research and, like he said, ask the right questions. And this is pretty key to both the Witness's game design and just puzzle game design in general, is teaching players how to ask questions about the puzzle systems that they can then, relate into how they play the game. So, like, the Witness is not just about, it's not just about learning how the puzzles work so you can solve puzzles. It's about how you learn how the puzzles work. How do you figure out what each symbol means if you don't know how to ask the right questions? That sort of thing. It doesn't say how to, it is more like exploring so that you come to your own conclusion about how to ask those questions, which itself is a question that needs to be asked. But then he gives sort of a hopeful message at the end. So at the start, he mentions that the reason why things change, or the way to change things, is based on knowledge, which is a fair assessment. And then he sort of starts with, like, how do you fix this problem? Well, the simplest thing is to look at something in your life and ask how you can change it for the better. And this is a pretty fair way of sort of reverse engineering what questions you can ask, is to say, what information can I learn to help myself or help the people around me? But it is also sort of hopeful, like, if this solution to the bunker puzzle wasn't exactly fulfilling, then what can you do to go make it fulfilling? What questions can you ask that make this more of a solution? Or what can you do to find more of a solution? It's sort of encouragement then for the player. Also, it starts with this loud explosion, you know? This crescendo with, like, a literal bunch of smoke and colors and all that, which I think is important because if you look at this panel, you can't actually see the video or anything. You could even miss it if you just turn around and walk away. So by making this loud, sudden noise and visual, it makes sure the player realizes that there is a video to begin with. Additionally, there are circles in that video, which, you know what that means. Let's back up a bit and hope I can get this quickly.
This stuff's easier to take, isn't it? Understandable. Got people.
Oh, I missed it. Can I get the petri dish?
It's hard to take because it removes the reassurance.
Oh, it just zoomed me in. Cool, thanks. So, there is a sort of irony between those, that even though he kind of tries to show the petri dish as being more strong for the purposes of making change in your life, or, like, less comfortable but more accurate than the like mural depiction in the book, both of those are both given one environmental puzzle on this doorway that, like, yeah, like, one might be more close to the truth than the other, but in the terms of this, like, metaphysical world, they're equals, which is kind of funny. In addition, I guess this is more of a game design thing, but I just want to note that, so, like, if you're looking through the doorway, here, let me put it like this: the amino acid petri dish or whatever and the mural there, they both have very obvious circles, but also the outlines of the window and the doorway are pretty unique patterns, and the coloring of them are so sorry, the coloring of them is so striking and unique, and they have those sort of like markings around them that it's almost unmistakable that if you know about environmental puzzles, you'll connect to the doorway to the amino acids, and then maybe the window to the mural, which is important because it helps show that yes, the videos will have environmental puzzles, which is relevant for later. So that's the first of our videos. Each video is obviously very significant to the game and its ideas, but many of them do sort of contradict each other as well with everything else in the game. Like the Burke video contradicts the Eddington the Eddington doorway audio log. Alright, so getting caught on a rock. So the town, this is our first time here really. It is a hub of all the mechanics in the game. I'll cover it much more in depth later on in the series, because the Juggling Man sort of Easter egg, optical illusion, I guess. A lot of people like this Easter egg. It's pretty relevant, or pretty not relevant. It's pretty notable because it's pretty easy to see from the orchard. It's one of the earlier ones people can see in like the sort of intended average playthrough. So yeah, the town has a lot of different puzzle types. I think every puzzle type is represented here. Every puzzle type from the main areas, which is intentional. It's a hub that people can go back to once they've learned an area to try and see if they can clear it further, which is fitting for the idea of a town, which is like a gathering of people of different cultures and ideas. It's a melting pot. In this case, people from all over the island appear at the town, and similarly, mechanics from all over the island appear at the town. It's also sort of like a harbor, especially with a shipping container there in this dock. So it makes sense that trade would exist in this town, trade in the form of puzzle ideas. We can already do this. There we go. Reflection puzzle. But it leads up to this puzzle, which we haven't yet learned how to do. And if you just see the panel, I mean, you might know part of what to do, but it's not quite easy to understand right now. Like I said, I'll go to the town much later. Also, what is very clearly one of the trees from the orchard with an apple, but we can't complete it yet. So I'll revisit the town later. For now, I am going to move on to the peninsula. I've been really hyping up this peninsula, and I hope that's fitting because it has a lot of nothing. So much nothing that when playing this game, or when this game first came out, a lot of people were sure there was some secret puzzle in the peninsula, because like there's these meandering paths that don't really lead anywhere. They don't look at any sort of optical illusion. Like that in the water isn't an optical illusion. I mean, you might see like there's some funny rendering stuff going on. You might see a face or something, but it's not the most obvious one in the game compared to one I'm sure many people are familiar with. You can't really see any environmental puzzles from here. There's no panels, not even a Dorito panel, from what I remember. There is one audio log, and then there's this building. So this is another fun little Easter egg. It's the man is reaching for like a chalice, but then in his shadow he's holding the chalice. So when you first enter this building, there is the archway of the mountain in plain view. But you can also see the sun from here. And I want to note that while it looks like the man is reaching for the chalice, if we were to get up next to him, it almost seems like the sun is like right above the chalice, right? And so if we were to imagine that, we were kneeling down at his perspective, we might be able to see it as like the sun being inside the chalice or overlapped with it. So in this case, he could be reaching for the chalice or he could be reaching for the sun. And at this point, the sun has been really hyped up a lot in the game. There's those like sun logos on like the pillows in the tutorial, in the napkin in the orchard. There's the whole desert, which has the connections to like a sun deity. And then there's this, which has a man reaching for a chalice or the sun. So there's one audio log here from our friend Nicholas of Cusa that explains this.
O Lord God, helper of those who seek you, I see you in the garden of paradise, and I do not know what I see, because I see nothing visible. I know this alone, that I know that I do not know what I see, and that I can never know. I do not know how to name you, because I do not know what you are. Should anyone tell me that you are named by this or that name, by the fact that one gives a name, I know that it is not your name. For the wall beyond which I see you is the limit of every mode of signification by names. Should anyone express any concept by which you could be conceived, I know that this concept is not a concept of you, for every concept finds its boundary at the wall of paradise. Should anyone express any likeness and say that you ought to be conceived according to it, I know in the same way that this is not a likeness of you. So too, if anyone, wishing to furnish the means by which you might be understood, should set forth an understanding of you, one is still far removed from you. For the highest wall separates you from all these, and secludes you from everything that can be said or thought, because you are absolute from all the things that can fall within any concept. Nicholas of Cusa, 1453.
Sorry, did I say Nicholas of Cusa's audio log would explain things? No, so pretty much, again, from what I gather, Nicholas of Cusa is saying that because God is so incomprehensibly greater than humans, any attempt for humans to comprehend God isn't true. It's not like the true version. And so, because of that, God is unknowable or incomprehensible, in that anything in heaven, because of that, is also incomprehensible. He explains this, the like walls of paradise, the walled garden, which is, Adam and Eve, Garden of Eden, but it's sort of just the presence and being of God itself. Now, in this case, it's right next to this man reaching for the chalice. The cup kind of brings to mind the Holy Grail, which, not only being a relic of Christian significance, is also it's also a term for like the ultimate prize, the ultimate objective. In this case, he can't reach it physically, unfortunately, and we can't even reach it either. We're not even at eye level to it. He can reach it in the metaphysical world cast by shadows, but not in the physical world. Additionally, so he's reaching for the sun, and we were talking about this sort of unreachable thing. Nicholas of Cusa is okay that God is unreachable. He finds it pious, that sort of act of reaching for it despite that, trying to know it despite it being unknowing. In the same way, this man is reaching for the unreachable both with the chalice and with the sun. So this is another in the pile of sun deity illusions here. The sun is given all this prominence. It's kind of compared to a god. At this point, the player has to wonder if there is an environmental puzzle with the sun. There is. I'm not going to touch on it now. Probably won't till the end of the series, but it's very, very important that you keep that in mind. This is probably the most direct comparison between sun as deity and sun as goal. Also, so the display case, you would think that the Grail would be inside one of these, but it's on top of one. None of these cases have glass, except for the thing that the Grail is on. I want to remind you of the Cusa audio log in Symmetry, where he explained the invisible and visible, and how the wall to the garden is invisible and visible. Likewise, we talked about how glass, in a way, is visible and invisible, because it is transparent, but we also can see the existence of glass. We see through it and we see it. And so it's interesting that the sun and the chalice are both covered from the man's eyes by a sheet of glass. Oh boy. Okay. And so similarly, this is always interesting to me, just the peninsula, because it's sort of like a giant dead end. I mentioned how people, when this game came out, thought there was some grand, like, secret puzzle here in the peninsula, because it's given such prominence. Like, it's visible from the start of the game. It is this huge jutting out area compared to, like, some of the smaller standalone areas, like the beaches over there. It has all these pathways that don't really go anywhere or do anything. I mean, it has the trees that are used for the reflection puzzle, but that's not really part of the peninsula so much as it is part of the town. And so it's also noticeable on the map of the island on the boat, which I'm not sure if I can summon the boat there or not, or if I have to go somewhere else. And then also there was that piece of driftwood in the lake, which I mentioned is sort of like this peninsula. A piece of driftwood is, it's dead, but it's a sign of life. But like, also it looks like life, in that people have sort of mistaken driftwood to be animals and stuff like that. But the driftwood in the lake is in the direction of the peninsula. It's in the location. And that deadness kind of matches how the peninsula has, like, really brown grass, sort of just brown in general. It's not as lush as the rest of the island, especially compared to the jungle in the monastery here. So it's so different that it's almost made to be unsatisfying. It's almost made to be disappointing a little. You have Cusa talking about the impossible to understand God. In a way, like, we can't understand, something out of our grasp like that. Or at least the pursuit of trying to understand God is probably going to be unsatisfying in the end for people that partake it. I'm not saying that The Witness wants to be unsatisfying, so much as it is that there is a clear sort of perspective given to, like, what it means to search for something and what it means to reach something. After all, the man is reaching the chalice in his shadow. Also, that building has high walls. So going down here, there's another fun little real-life, modern-day objects. These towels have the sun logo, and this chair here is actually facing the sun. Oh, hey, it's behind a cloud. What do you know? But, yeah, if you were to lay down and just look up, you would see the sun. So this is another instance of the sun logo sort of casting itself towards the sun and pointing towards it. There's also that same piece of driftwood, but it's white here on the beach. Kind of blends in. I think it's kind of disturbing how it is sort of compared to the lounge chair or the beach chair, as if the driftwood was resting on the ground. I don't know. If you kind of look at it in a funny way, it might look like somebody laying down. I don't know if I would quite say that so much as it is similar to how driftwood in real life looks like the Loch Ness Monster. But it's kind of an interesting way to look at it. In a way, the wood is laying on the beach, much like that chair. But it is also dead wood. But that's neither here nor there. There's more driftwood as well as you go out towards the jungle. Could be that these driftwood itself washed up on the shore, or it could be that they fell from the jungle trees. I really like the coastline of the jungle because it has, one thing, it has this funny little path here, but it has a lot of things that look like they could be environmental puzzles but aren't. Sorry, they aren't. But I don't know, there's just something funny to me about that. Like, it's so mysterious already. You know, the idea of a wooded jungle on a lost island. Like, you know, hope there aren't any secret government labs there. But it's sort of also bringing to mind how traditionally the woods, and of course woods on islands, in traditional literature kind of make people go insane. Is that there are all these symbols on this jungle facade here that if you try to find environmental puzzles in all of them, you might get too obsessed. Oh, cool, you can pull up the boat here. So this is actually the first time we've seen the boat this playthrough. Oh, it makes a loud noise. So if you look here on the map, you can see a few things. Just all the details. There is the tutorial in the bottom left. You can see there's the glass house there for Symmetry and the gate to Symmetry Island, along with one of the trees there. You can see the face tree in the top right there. You can even see a face if you look on the bottom left side, which is particularly funny to me. They have all these sort of interpretations of the different mechanics and how they function. And then, yeah, right down here, there's that peninsula, which is given prominence, the same as the windmill. Oh, the windmill actually has its own logo from town, which is the little tower. Yeah, it's given prominence. It has its own little sketch there. It doesn't have any mechanics, but it's still a key location. Also, from here, you can pretty clearly see how the lake relates to the map. You can see that. Whoa. Oh, okay. You can specifically see like how all the indents relate to each other and the outcroppings. There's the... I can't really zoom in or else it'll do this, but down in the bottom left there is the peninsula with the intro, the peninsula with that audio log we were just at. That little dot to the left is Symmetry Island. So if it wasn't clear yet that the island and the lake are the same shape, then somebody who sees the boat for the first time should get that immediately. Alright. So then, there is something else here.
One day I happened to be occupied with the subject of generation of waves by wind. I took down the standard treatise on hydrodynamics, and under that heading I read, if the external forces P prime sub YY, P prime sub XY be given multiples of e to the ikx plus at, where k and a are prescribed, the equations in question determine a and c, and thence, by 9, the value of eta. And so on for 2 pages. At the end, it is made clear that a wind of less than half a mile an hour will leave the surface unruffled. At a mile an hour, the surface is covered with minute corrugations due to capillary waves which decay immediately if the disturbing cause ceases. At 2 miles an hour, the gravity waves appear. As the author modestly concludes, our theoretical investigations give considerable insight into the incipient stages of wave formation. On another occasion, the same subject of generation of waves by wind was in my mind, but this time another book was more appropriate, and I read, "There are waters blown by changing winds to laughter, and lit by the rich skies all day, and after, frost, with a gesture, stays the waves that dance and wandering loveliness. He leaves a white, unbroken glory, a gathered radiance, a width, a shining peace under the night." The magic words bring back the scene. Again, we feel nature drawing close to us, uniting with us, till we are filled with the gladness of the waves dancing in the sunshine, with the awe of the moonlight on the frozen lake. These were not moments when we fell below ourselves. We did not look back on them and say, "It was disgraceful for a man with 6 sober senses and a scientific understanding to let himself be deluded in that way. I will take Lamb's hydrodynamics with me next time." It is good that there should be such moments for us. Life would be stunted and narrow if we could feel no significance in the world around us beyond that which can be weighed and measured with the tools of the physicist or described by the metrical symbols of the mathematician. Of course, it was an illusion. We can easily expose the rather clumsy trick that was played on us. Ethereal vibrations of various wavelengths, reflected at different angles from the disturbed interface between air and water, reached our eyes, and by photoelectric action caused appropriate stimuli to travel along the optic nerves to a brain center. Here, the mind set to work to weave an impression out of the stimuli. The incoming material was somewhat meager, but the mind is a great storehouse of associations that could be used to clothe the skeleton. Having woven an impression, the mind surveyed all that it had made and decided that it was very good. The critical faculty was lulled. We ceased to analyze and were conscious only of the impression as a whole. The warmth of the air, the scent of the grass, the gentle stir of the breeze, combined with the visual scene in one transcendent impression around us and within us. Associations emerging from their storehouse grew bolder. Perhaps we recalled the phrase, rippling laughter. Waves, ripples, laughter, gladness. The ideas jostled one another. Quite illogically, we were glad. Though what there can possibly be to be glad about in a set of ethereal vibrations no sensible person can explain, a mood of quiet joy suffused the whole impression. The gladness in ourselves was in nature, in the waves, everywhere. That's how it was. It was an illusion. Then why toy with it longer? These airy fancies which the mind, when we do not keep it severely in order, projects into the external world should be of no concern to the earnest seeker after truth. Get back to the solid substance of things, to the material of the water moving under the pressure of the wind and the force of gravitation, in obedience to the laws of hydrodynamics. But the solid substance of things is another illusion. It too is a fancy projected by the mind into the external world. We have chased the solid substance from the continuous liquid to the atom, from the atom to the electron, and there we have lost it. But at least it will be said, we have reached something real at the end of the chase, the protons and electrons. Or, if the new quantum theory condemns these images as too concrete and leaves us with no coherent images at all, at least we have symbolic coordinates and momenta and Hamiltonian functions, devoting themselves with single-minded purpose to ensuring that QP minus PQ shall be equal to IH over 2 pi. I have tried to show that by following this course we reach a cyclic scheme which, from its very nature, can only be a partial expression of our environment. It is not reality, but the skeleton of reality. Actuality has been lost in the exigencies of the chase. Having first rejected the mind as a worker of illusion, we have in the end to return to the mind and say, Here are worlds well and truly built on a basis more secure than your fanciful illusions. But there is nothing to make any one of them an actual world. Please choose one and weave your fanciful images into it. That alone can make it actual. We have torn away the mental fancies to get at the reality beneath, only to find that the reality of that which is beneath is bound up with its potentiality of awakening these fancies. It is because the mind, the weaver of illusion, is also the only guarantor of reality, that reality is always to be sought at the base of illusion. Illusion is to reality as the smoke to the fire. I will not urge that hoary untruth, there is no smoke without fire, but it is reasonable to inquire whether, in the mystical illusions of man, there is not a reflection of an underlying reality. Arthur Eddington, 1927.
Okay, so that is probably the most direct contrast or contradiction to the Burke video. It furthers the idea that Eddington presented in his doorway audio log, that the world that we see is not the same as the scientific truth sort of deep down. In this way, in this audio log, he calls it the actual world, is like this perceived world that we interact with. He starts by pretty much saying that there's room for both science and poetry, art, philosophy, what have you. He sort of gives it like the science behind wind and waves is confusing, and the depictions of wind and waves by a poem can be closer to how we experience the world due to its like emotional aspect. It relates back to ourselves, and so in a way we get a better picture of what they're saying if we're untrained in the way of like mathematics or physics, just by being able to relate the poem to our experiences. And then he sort of goes on to say, like, so suppose you don't agree with that because it is somebody else's interpretation using colorful words and prose to describe something that, you know, it's not truly laughter, and Frost isn't actually pressing down on the waves as like a personified force. But then he does like this funny thing where he explains how everything we see is, you know, light reflecting off of surfaces and objects and then going through our optic nerves, in which our mind uses its memories to turn an incomplete statement or incomplete view into a complete one. Sort of saying that, sure, the depiction of the waves by the poet might be subjective, the mind itself doesn't show us the true reality, and that we never can. The mind itself, our minds, are creating illusions constantly. And then he says how, you know, we can go back to talking about fluid dynamics and gravity and wind, but we can also go further down into the individual elements, and then into protons and electrons, and then we could even go further into quantum things like quarks. You know, every level of science is sort of leads to another smaller level, and sure, maybe eventually there'll be a point, but what he's saying is that what we know about these we can't see, and our understanding of them is itself sort of imagined by the mind. We don't see protons and electrons individually, I mean, unless you have like an electron microscope, but how they interact and function by and large is given motion by our mind. And even if you don't agree that even if you don't agree that we're imagining or we're using personification of particles to explain how they function, you can at least agree that when we use a strong microscope to see electrons or whatever, we are still seeing that information through our eyes, which is turned into our mind, and scientifically, you know, the mind plays tricks on us. You don't always see your nose in front of your face, for instance. So when you're looking through a microscope, or when you're looking at an image or recording of these electrons, you're not seeing your nose, so you are still experiencing an illusion. That in order to see the scientific truth, we still have to come to terms with the fact that we are seeing through this sort of illusion that the mind is presenting with us. And that even then, it's not the actual world that most people experience. And so he sort of ends with, like, kind of saying that even if it's not the scientific truth, maybe because of the fact that we all experience things through our brains, and that this poet surely had experienced the waves through their brain, then maybe there is some hint of truth to that poem. Because after all, it's just relaying experiences that we can share to each other. Also, there's sort of a funny meta aspect to it, that we look at this in game and we think, oh, we're on a beach and there's waves. The waves are crashing against the rocks and they make sound. But that itself is an illusion. That we're on a 3D model with collision, that not even everything on the beach is given its own collision from what I can tell. The waves aren't crashing, it's just an animation. And the sound that's being played is just a sound being played given our location in the world. It's not actually a product of waves hitting anything. However, we can use this to fill in the gaps, like, even though those are all separate things, we relate that to the feeling of being on the beach. I can almost picture, like, sand on my feet and the salty seawater air. Salty sea air? Salty air? Even though I'm not there in real life, just because I've had those experiences, the game sort of calls that to mind and lets me imagine them. And, like, in a way, there is sort of merit to both looking at the depths of how this is created. I mean, they had to make a completely in-house rendering in physics engine, well, not physics, but rendering engine to make The Witness. I'm not sure about the physics part, probably, but still, they had to make their own engine to make The Witness, and there is interesting info about that on the internet, but that doesn't mean that there's no room for the artistic interpretation of The Witness. That even though there's some interesting technical standpoints, even if me analyzing the game is interpreting the game through my lens and then putting that in a video, maybe there is some truth to it. Maybe the messages and the themes the game are showing are as equal as the science the game utilized to exist.